The paralegal dropped her pen when Camille walked through the door. Just let it fall. Didn't even look down for it. She just stared, the way you stare at something that doesn't fit where it's standing. Then she leaned toward her colleague, close enough that their shoulders touched, and she whispered something low and fast. Something she thought nobody else could hear. Later, she would admit what she said. That's the girl from the stairs, the one they left for dead. She didn't know Camille's name yet, didn't know her title, didn't know that the coat she was wearing cost more than 2 months of that girl's rent, or that the leather portfolio under her arm contained documents that had taken 18 months and every ounce of Camille's discipline to build. She didn't know any of that. What she knew was the story. The one that had floated through Atlanta the way ugly stories do, in church lobbies and family text threads and beauty shop chairs. She knew the version where Camille was the broken one, the daughter who fell apart, the girl who got left behind and couldn't handle it. She didn't know she was looking at the woman who had hired the entire firm. 3 years before that paralegal dropped her pen, Camille wasn't anybody's power move. She wasn't walking into law firms with a portfolio and a posture that made rooms go quiet. She was 25 years old, commuting 40 minutes each way to a healthcare company, where she managed scheduling and correspondence for people who never learned her last name. She ate lunch at her desk most days. She was good at being invisible. That's not a complaint. That's just the truth of who she was before all of it. She had her apartment. A 1-bedroom in a neighborhood that was trying to become something, with windows that let the evening light in, and a small wooden box on her nightstand that she'd had since she was 14. She had her friend Kezia, who called too much and meant every word of it. She had her routines. She had her peace. And she had her father, Raymond. Or at least, she had the version of Raymond she was still choosing to believe in. If you're new here, welcome. This channel tells the stories that most people are too tired or too scared to say out loud. If this is your first time, subscribe before we go any further. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story you're going to want to share. And if you've been here before, you already know we don't rush the truth. We let it breathe. Stay with me until the end. Because the moment that door opened and that lawyer was standing on the other side, that moment is one I still carry with me. And you need to understand everything that came before it to understand why. Camille's mother, Evelyn, died when Camille was 14. Breast cancer. Caught late, moved fast, took her in 11 months. The kind of loss that doesn't announce itself with language. It just rewires you. Changes what you're made of without asking permission. Before she died, Evelyn wrote her daughter a letter. Not a long one, just a single page, folded in thirds, tucked inside a card with a yellow flower on the cover. She gave it to Camille 3 days before the end, when she could still hold a pen, but not much else. Camille still had that letter. 11 years later, she still had it. It lived in the wooden box on her nightstand. Soft at the folds now, the ink faded in a few places. One corner water-stained from a night years ago when Camille had held it and cried so hard she didn't notice what her tears were landing on. She'd read it so many times she could recite it. But she still unfolded it when she needed to see the handwriting, her mother's handwriting. That particular slant, those particular loops. Proof that somebody had sat down and chosen to put words together specifically for her. The letter said a lot of things, but the line that mattered, the one Camille's eyes always went to first, was near the end. Her mother had written, "You were never a burden. You were the whole point." Raymond remarried 6 years after Evelyn died. Her name was Dorothea. She was 51, well-dressed, active in their church, and she had a smile that worked on most people in the first 10 minutes. She had a way of filling a room with warmth that felt real until you'd known her long enough to notice it was always directed outward, always performing for whoever was watching. Raymond was a man who needed somebody to take care of the details of a life. Dorothea was a woman who needed a life worth taking care of. They made a certain kind of sense. Camille tried. She genuinely tried. She went to Sunday dinners. She brought food when she was asked, arrived on time, helped clear the table, made conversation with Dorothea's girlfriends who came through the house in rotation like a committee. She called Raymond every Sunday. Sometimes he called back. Mostly, he didn't. She told herself that was just how he was, that it wasn't personal, that men of his generation weren't built for the kind of closeness she wanted from him. She told herself a lot of things that kept her from seeing what was actually happening. The first time Dorothea cut her, it was small enough to explain away. Christmas dinner. The whole family there, Raymond's sister Aunt Brenda, Brenda's husband, 2 cousins and their kids, a couple from the church whose names Camille could never fully retain. Dorothea had set the dining room table beautifully. Good china, candles, a centerpiece that looked like something out of a magazine. There was no place set for Camille. She stood in the doorway of the dining room with her coat still on and her dish in her hands. She'd brought sweet potato pie, Raymond's favorite, made from Evelyn's recipe. And she counted the chairs, counted them again. Then Dorothea breezed in from the kitchen with a serving dish and looked at her with an expression that was perfectly calibrated to read as innocent surprise. "Oh, honey, I didn't know you were coming. Nobody told me you were coming." Raymond was already seated. He looked up from his phone. He said, "I thought I told you." Dorothea said, "Raymond, baby, you know you didn't." She was smiling. The smile never moved. A folding chair was eventually found. It was placed at the corner of the table where 2 sides met. The seat nobody wants. The seat that marks you as an afterthought. Camille sat in it for 2.5 hours and smiled at everyone who looked at her and told herself it was a miscommunication. That was the first cut. Clean, shallow, easy to dismiss. The second one came 6 weeks later when Camille stopped by and noticed the wall at the bottom of the staircase. The wall where her father had always kept family photographs. There was a photo from Camille's high school graduation. Raymond with his arm around her, both of them squinting into the sun. Her parents' wedding photo. A picture of Evelyn holding baby Camille in the hospital. All of it was gone. The wall now had a mirror and 2 abstract prints that Dorothea had bought from somewhere. When Camille asked Raymond about it, he said they were redecorating. He said Dorothea had a vision for the space. He said it very quickly, the way a man says something he's been prepared to say. Camille stood in front of that bare wall for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen and helped Dorothea with dinner and didn't say another word about it. The third cut came from the church, or rather, from the people in it. Camille started noticing things. The way conversations shifted when she arrived at a family gathering. The way Aunt Brenda, who had always been warm, started being carefully neutral in a way that wasn't quite right. The way Sister Vernice from the Women's Auxiliary pulled Raymond aside at a church anniversary dinner and glanced at Camille while they talked. Later, Camille would understand that Dorothea had been working the room for months by then, painting a picture. Not dramatically, not with accusations, just with soft strokes. Raymond's daughter has always been a little difficult. Grief does things to children. She struggles to accept change. We pray for her. By the time Camille felt the cold, the climate had already been arranged. And still, Raymond said nothing. He watched Camille's mother's furniture get sold at an estate sale Dorothea organized without asking. He watched Camille get seated at the corner of tables and cut from conversations and quietly erased from the story of his household. And every time Camille came to him, Not yelling, not accusing, just saying, "Daddy, something doesn't feel right." Raymond said the same thing in different ways. "You're too sensitive. She's trying her best. Why do you always have to make things hard?" That was when Camille understood that Raymond's silence wasn't neutrality. It was a choice, made over and over again, in her direction. Then came the Sunday afternoon that changed everything. She hadn't planned to stop by. That was the thing she kept coming back to later. She hadn't planned any of it. Raymond had mentioned on the phone 2 nights before that he wasn't feeling well, something about his blood pressure, and Camille had stopped at a pharmacy on her way across town and picked up his prescription and a few other things without thinking too hard about it. She still had her key. She'd had it for years. She let herself in through the side door the way she always did and called out his name to announce herself. But the house was noisier than usual. The television in the living room, some kind of music somewhere upstairs, and her voice didn't carry. She was walking toward the kitchen when she heard Dorothea's voice. Close and focused and talking faster than she usually talked in company. That quick, certain voice people use when they think they're alone. She was on the phone. Camille stopped walking. She didn't plan to listen, but she heard the word lawyer, and then she heard the word policy, and then she heard her mother's name, Evelyn, and her feet stopped making decisions without her. Dorothea was saying, "The designation was made when the child was a minor, so that's the angle. Raymond signed the new documents 14 months ago. Yes, I have copies of everything. We're not moving yet. We're just making sure the foundation is right when the time comes." A pause. A laugh. Short and dry. She still thinks he loves her. Let her think it. It keeps her manageable. The kitchen was 10 feet away. The side door was behind her. Camille stood in the hallway between those two fixed points, and she did not breathe. She left the medication on the porch. She got in her car. She drove home. She didn't cry immediately. The body doesn't always cry when it should. Sometimes it just goes very still and very cold, the way water does, right before it turns to ice. She sat in her parked car outside her apartment building for a long time, and in the silence, she began to re-see everything. The photos, the furniture, the folding chair at the corner of the table, the redirected conversations. The years of "you're too sensitive," "she's trying," "why do you make things hard?" It hadn't been pettiness. It hadn't been a difficult personality adjusting to a blended family. It had been a strategy. Dorothea hadn't been trying to edge Camille out of the house. She had been trying to edge her out of Raymond's estate. Specifically, out of a life insurance policy that Camille's own mother had taken out and designated to her daughter before she died. That money was supposed to be Camille's. Evelyn had meant it to be Camille's. And for 14 months, while Raymond smiled and said she's trying her best, documents had been signed and foundations had been laid to make sure it never reached her. Camille called Raymond that night. She didn't accuse. She just told him what she'd heard. She kept her voice steady. She chose every word carefully. He was quiet for a long time after she finished. Long enough that she thought maybe something was landing. Long enough that she let herself believe, for just a moment, that he was going to say something real. Then he said, "Camille, you need to stop looking for problems." And he hung up. She stared at her phone in the dark. The apartment was quiet. And somewhere in that quiet, something in Camille's chest that had been soft for a very long time went hard. She went to the house 2 weeks later. She told herself it was a last conversation. She needed to look her father in the eye and say the words out loud and give him one final opportunity to be who she needed him to be. She wasn't carrying rage when she went. She was carrying grief. The specific grief of someone who still loves the person who keeps choosing to hurt them. Dorothea answered the door. The conversation was brief. Dorothea did not perform warmth this time. There was no witness to perform for. She stood in the doorway of her own kitchen, arms loosely crossed, and she told Camille in a voice so calm it was almost gentle that she was no longer welcome in that house. That Raymond had made his choice. That it was time for Camille to build her own life and leave theirs alone. That grief was not an inheritance, and love that had to be chased wasn't love. Every word was measured. Every sentence landed where it was aimed. Camille turned to leave. The staircase was behind her, the same staircase she'd been walking up and down since she was a child in this house, since before Raymond was Raymond with Dorothea, since back when her mother's photos were on the wall and her mother's furniture was in the living room, and this house felt like something that had her name somewhere in it. She doesn't know exactly what happened next. She knows she was at the top of the stairs. She knows Dorothea was behind her. She knows there was contact, a push, a shove, a hand that applied force. And then there was nothing solid beneath her feet. And then there was the falling. She hit the bottom hard. Her wrist took the worst of it, bent back at an angle that told her immediately, before the pain fully arrived, that something was broken. Her shoulder slammed the baseboard. She sat at the foot of the stairs and the world spun and her vision went white at the edges for a long moment. When it cleared, Dorothea was standing at the top of the staircase, looking down at her. Not panicked, not guilty, just still. And she said in that same measured voice, "Unwanted children should learn to fall quietly." The living room door was closed. Raymond was behind it. He had heard all of it. He did not come out. Camille drove herself to urgent care. Her wrist was fractured, hairline, they said, but it needed a brace and 6 weeks of careful treatment. She sat in the waiting room alone under fluorescent lights and filled out her own paperwork with her good hand, and she did not call anyone, because there was no one left to call who hadn't already been turned against her or didn't belong to the same silence Raymond had chosen. The months that followed were the worst of it. The fracture in her wrist healed faster than everything else. She missed too much work, not entirely from the wrist, but from the specific paralysis that descends when the ground underneath your whole sense of self has been pulled away. She fell behind on rent. She tried to consult 2 different attorneys about the estate situation and couldn't sustain the legal fees past the initial conversations. She was evicted from her apartment in March. She took Kezia up on the couch offer she'd made in the way good friends make offers, meaning it, hoping it won't be needed. The church, when the story reached it, received the version Dorothea had shaped. She showed up causing drama. Raymond had to ask her to leave. It's been so hard on him. Aunt Brenda stopped calling. A cousin sent a text that said, "I'm praying for you," and never followed up on what exactly she was praying about. The pastor did not reach out. Camille sat on Kezia's couch with her wrist in a brace and her mother's letter in her hand. She unfolded it in the dark, the way she had so many times before. The handwriting was the same, the folds were the same, the water stain in the corner was the same. You were never a burden. You were the whole point. She read it twice. Then she folded it and held it against her chest for a minute. And then she set it in her lap. And something in her face, something Kezia would describe later, trying to put language to it. Something closed, and then opened again. Not like a door swinging wide, more like a window cracking, just enough to let something in. She didn't say anything. She just sat there in the dark with her mother's words in her lap and made a decision so quiet it didn't even make a sound. She tried Raymond's number one more time, 3 weeks later. The number had been changed. She didn't tell anyone what she was planning, not even Kezia. Not because she didn't trust her. Kezia was the truest person in her life, but because she was afraid that saying it out loud would make it feel optional, and she needed it to feel like the only thing, like breathing. She got up at 5 in the morning on Kezia's couch, and she made a plan. What she had: 11 years of administrative and operations experience in healthcare. A mind that had always been more organized than her circumstances. A name, Ms. Patricia Wade, written in the back of an old notebook. Patricia had been her supervisor 4 jobs ago, technically, but the kind of supervisor who sees you rather than just managing you. She had told Camille more than once, in that straightforward way she had, "You are operating at about 30% of what you're capable of. I don't know why you keep settling." Camille had smiled and said thank you and kept settling. She found Patricia's email and wrote 2 sentences. "I think I'm finally ready to stop settling. If you have anything, I'll take it." Patricia wrote back in 4 hours. She had a contract operations role, 3 months, renewable, unglamorous, real. It paid enough to matter. Camille also did something she hadn't told anyone she was considering. She enrolled in a paralegal certification program online, nights and weekends, self-paced. Not because she wanted to become a paralegal, but because she had sat in that urgent care alone with a fractured wrist and been ambushed by legal language she didn't understand, and she had decided, with a quiet fury she was learning to work with rather than fight against, that she would never again be in a legal situation she didn't understand from the inside. She moved into a studio apartment in April. She cooked at home. She studied at night. She did not post about any of it, did not update anyone, did not send signals. Somewhere on the other side of Atlanta, Dorothea was telling anyone who asked that Camille had fallen apart after she was asked to leave, that she'd moved away, that Raymond was doing much better now that things had calmed down. The story was tidy and fully assembled and didn't need Camille's input to keep running, which was exactly what Camille needed. 18 months is a long time. It's also nothing. It depends on what you do with it. What Camille did with it. She turned the contract role into a permanent position, operations manager at a mid-size healthcare consulting firm, the kind of job that had her name on correspondence and her judgment trusted on things that mattered. She got good at it quickly because she had always been good at it. She'd just been doing it in rooms that took the credit themselves. And she started building the legal case. The paralegal certification had done what she needed it to do. It gave her the language and the framework to understand what had actually happened. The life insurance policy her mother had taken out and designated to Camille as a minor was valued at $180,000 at the time the beneficiary designation was redirected. The redirection had been accomplished through documents Raymond signed 14 months before Camille overheard that phone call. But there was a problem with those documents. A problem Camille had begun to suspect, and her attorney, once she could afford one, confirmed. Raymond's cognitive decline had begun well before those signatures. It was early stage, and Dorothea had managed it carefully, managing it in the specific sense of concealing it from family, from the church, from anyone who might have raised a question about his capacity to make legal decisions. His former physician had noted concerns in his records. Dorothea had switched him to a new doctor shortly after. Undue influence, exploited cognitive impairment, beneficiary redirection under contested circumstances. Camille's attorney, a woman named Adrienne, sharp and unhurried and deeply unbothered by opposing counsel, told her they had a real case. Not a certain one, but a real one. Camille built the file over 8 months, gathered medical records, built a timeline, tracked the financial transfer documentation, found 2 witnesses, Raymond's former physician and a family member of Dorothea's, who had grown uncomfortable enough to speak. She did not file until every piece was in place. She didn't move out of anger, she moved out of precision. There was a night, near the end of those 8 months, when Camille sat at her kitchen table with all of it spread out in front of her. The records, the timeline, the correspondence, and she opened the wooden box and took out her mother's letter. She unfolded it in the kitchen light. Read it the way she always read it, eyes going to that line first. You were never a burden. You were the whole point. She folded it back slowly, and then, deliberately, she did something she'd never done before. She placed the letter in the file folder, with the documents, with the legal case, not as evidence. Her attorney had been clear about what qualified, but as something that belonged there. Her mother's intent, in her mother's handwriting, traveling with the rest of it. This time, the letter wasn't just something she held in the dark. It was something she was bringing somewhere. The call came from Dorothea herself. Raymond had a health event, serious enough that a care conversation was needed. The kind where family and attorneys and practical decisions all converge in the same room. Dorothea framed it as an invitation. The message was brief and carefully worded, the way all of Dorothea's words were carefully worded. Your father would like you present. 6 words, nothing more. Camille read it twice. Then she called Adrienne. The meeting was set for a Saturday morning at the family house. Camille dressed carefully, not dramatically, not to perform, just with the particular intention of a woman who knows that how you carry yourself into a room determines what the room believes about you before you open your mouth. She arrived 6 minutes early. Dorothea's sister Phyllis answered the door. Phyllis looked at her the way the paralegal had. That specific look of someone whose information about you is 2 years out of date. She said, with a practiced coolness, that the meeting was immediate family only. Camille didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shift her weight or look away. She just stood there in the doorway of that house. The house with her mother's furniture gone and her mother's photos replaced, and a staircase she knew from the bottom now. And she said, calmly and without heat, "Tell your attorney that the other attorney is already inside." Phyllis blinked, looked behind Camille, where Adrienne stood in a gray coat, already scanning the room over Phyllis's shoulder with the mild, total awareness of a woman who does this for a living. The door opened. The living room had been arranged like a meeting, chairs pulled into a loose circle, Raymond in the armchair he always preferred, Dorothea seated close to the family attorney, Aunt Brenda and 2 cousins arranged along the couch, the pastor from the church present as some kind of moral weight. It was a room built to make a particular conclusion feel inevitable. Everyone in it expected a particular version of Camille, the one from the story Dorothea had been telling for 2 years. The fractured wrist version, the couch version, the girl who fell apart and moved away. What walked into the room was something the story hadn't prepared them for. Camille didn't perform her entrance. She didn't look around to check who was watching. She crossed to an empty chair, set her portfolio on the floor beside it, and sat down with the particular stillness of someone who knows exactly why they're there. Adrienne took the chair beside her. Nobody said anything for a moment. The family attorney looked at Adrienne. Something passed between them. A flicker of professional recognition, a silent recalibration. Dorothea's eyes moved to Camille. The warmth she usually deployed, the practiced, outward-facing warmth that had run this household's social weather for 6 years, wasn't there. What was there, instead, was something that moved quickly across her face, and then went still again. Not guilt. Not yet. Just the first evidence that the math she had been running for 2 years might not be adding up the way she thought. Aunt Brenda looked at Camille and looked away. The cousin on the end of the couch found something interesting on the floor. Raymond was looking at Camille. He had aged in the 2 years since she'd seen him. Smaller somehow, in the armchair that used to fit him differently. His hands, resting in his lap, had the particular quality of hands that had stopped doing much with themselves. But his eyes, when they found her, his eyes were present. Whatever was happening to Raymond, the recognition in his face when he saw his daughter was not diminished. He said her name. Just that. Camille? The way you say a name you haven't said out loud in a long time and are surprised to find it still fits in your mouth. She looked at him. She didn't smile, but she held his gaze and she didn't look away. Adrienne spoke first, and she spoke calmly. She did not grandstand. She did not introduce the case with rhetoric or emotion. She said that her client was contesting the beneficiary designation redirect on Raymond's life insurance policy on the grounds of undue influence and exploited cognitive impairment, and that they had documentation they would like to present. The family attorney started to say something about procedure and timing. Adrienne acknowledged him pleasantly and placed the first set of documents on the coffee table. Medical records. Raymond's former physician's notes. The ones documenting early-stage cognitive concerns. A timeline showing the dates of those concerns relative to the date Raymond had signed the new estate documents. Financial records showing the redirect. A signed statement from the former physician. A second statement from a witness Dorothea hadn't expected to speak. Dorothea's attorney looked at the documents. He looked at Adrienne. He was doing the same math the room was doing. Dorothea began to say something. Her attorney put his hand out. Not dramatically, just a quiet, lateral gesture. She stopped. The room was very quiet. Adrienne reached into the portfolio and placed one final item on the table. Not a legal document, a letter. Folded in thirds, worn at the creases, one corner water-stained. She did not enter it as evidence. She described it as a record of original intent, a mother's documented wish, in her own handwriting, that her daughter be protected. You were never a burden. You were the whole point. Adrienne read those words aloud, quietly, and set the letter back down. Aunt Brenda covered her mouth with her hand. The cousin on the couch looked up from the floor. The pastor, who had prayed over this household and this marriage and this version of events for 6 years, had no words available to him. He sat with his hands clasped and stared at the middle distance. The room understood now. Not the legal specifics. Those would take longer to fully absorb. But the shape of the thing, the full shape of it, the photos removed from the wall, the furniture sold, the folding chair at the corner of the table, the redirected policy, the managed silence of a man whose capacity to protect his daughter had been quietly eroded until there was nothing left to erode. The staircase. The words spoken over a woman sitting at the bottom of it. The room understood that all of it had been connected, that none of it had been careless, that it had been, from the beginning, a plan. Dorothea was very still. She had the quality of a woman who had built her entire security on a structure that was now revealing itself to have been constructed on someone else's foundation, and the foundation was pulling away. She did not cry. She did not speak again. She sat in the chair closest to the family attorney, and she was smaller than she had ever been in any room Camille had seen her in. And she looked, finally and without the armor of her warmth and her performance and her careful words, like exactly what she was. The policy, with accrued interest over the intervening years, had grown. The total value is now just over $200,000. The legal redirect, built on signatures obtained under contested capacity, was unwound. Camille was reinstated as the named beneficiary. When the number was stated aloud, Aunt Brenda made a sound that wasn't quite words. One of the cousins exhaled through his nose and didn't look at Dorothea. Raymond reached across the space between their chairs toward Camille's hand. His fingers found the back of her hand and rested there. She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. She didn't smile, but she turned her hand over, and she let him hold it. Camille did not move back into that house. There was nothing in that house she needed anymore. She did not walk through the church on a Sunday to let people see what she had become. She did not call Aunt Brenda to deliver a speech. She did not send Dorothea a message of any kind. She paid Adrienne's firm. She put a portion of the settlement into a reserve, not investments, not spending, just the specific security of knowing that no legal situation could ambush her anymore, that she would never again be at the bottom of a staircase with no resources and no language and nobody coming. She made one donation to a legal aid organization in Atlanta that helps young women navigate estate disputes they can't afford to fight alone. The kind of organization she had needed and couldn't find when she needed it. She visits Raymond in his care facility twice a month. She brings his favorite food sometimes. Sweet potato pie. Evelyn's recipe. The same one she carried to that Christmas dinner where there was no place set for her. They watch old sports footage together, and sometimes he talks, and sometimes he doesn't, and she's learned that presence is its own language. She does not bring up Dorothea, neither does he. The wooden box is still on her nightstand. The letter is back inside it. Returned from the file folder, from the conference table, from the work it needed to do. It's just a letter again. Just her mother's handwriting in the evening light. She reads it sometimes. Not as often as she used to. But she still reads it. Here is what Camille says when she thinks about all of it now. About the stairs. About the silence. About the years of being made to feel like she was the problem in every room she entered. She told me that unwanted children should learn to fall quietly. But she never considered that some of us hit the ground, count to 3, and get back up without making a sound. Until it's time. That's the thing about quiet. It runs in both directions. If you stayed with this story until the very end, thank you. That means something. Before you go, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment with your thoughts. This community is built on the people who show up and stay. And I want to ask you something. When Camille stood in that hallway and heard that phone call, when she heard the words, "It keeps her manageable," what would you have done? Would you have walked into that kitchen? Would you have confronted Raymond that same night? Or would you have done what she did? Gone silent? Gone home? And started building? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.